Hello, I'm Kyle Blaney. In a previous tutorial, I demonstrated the folders and files I use to help me keep my images organized. In this tutorial, I will demonstrate how I configure Adobe Lightroom to do most of the work for me. Let's start by revisiting my folder and file structure, but this time we'll look at it inside Lightroom. So as we can see in the Folders section of Lightroom, I use one top-level folder for each calendar year. And within each calendar year, I use a subfolder for each photo-taking event. And as I mentioned in the previous screencast, there's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship between dates and photo-taking events. So I had this trip where I didn't take very many photos, but I used a single photo-taking event for multiple days. And conversely, there are some days I've started to, in 2013, split up single days into multiple photo-taking events. So on April 13th, I went to 4 places to take photos, and you can see those 4 folders here, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, so they appear in chronological order. As I mentioned in the previous tutorial, I shoot Canon RAW, so my images are CR2 files. Also, I use XMP sidecar files in which Lightroom stores the changes I make to the raw CR2 files. Let's start by looking at a catalog setting that ensures that my XMP sidecar files are automatically created. From the main menu, select Edit, then Catalog Settings. In the Metadata tab, make sure that a checkmark appears in the box next to Automatically Write Changes into XMP. I'm almost ready to demonstrate the settings I use to import new images. But first, let's look at a general setting that puts me more in control of the import process. I sometimes use memory cards to transfer files from one computer to another, and I don't necessarily want Lightroom involved in that process if there happen to be images on the memory card. Therefore, I configure Lightroom not to show its import dialog every time it detects a memory card. This is done by editing Lightroom's General Preferences. From the main menu, select Edit, then Preferences. In the General tab, make sure there is no checkmark in the box next to Show Import Dialog when a memory card is detected. Okay, so now we're ready to import images to Lightroom. I've inserted a memory card into my computer, but because of the changes I've made to Lightroom's General Preferences, Lightroom does not automatically show me its import dialog. Instead, I need to tell Lightroom that I'm ready to import images by clicking on the Import button. Within the Import dialog, let's look at my settings. As I've already explained, I prefer XMP sidecar files to DNG files, so the main option I want is Copy rather than Copy as DNG. When I'm done importing my images, I want to take the memory card out of my computer and put it back in my camera. So I tell Lightroom to eject the card after import. Once the card is back in my camera, I don't tell my camera to delete the images from the card until the following day, when I'm sure the images have been backed up, both to a second local hard drive and to my online backup service. I make sure that the proper year is selected as the main destination folder of the import. In this case, the images were taken in 2013, so the correct destination folder is already selected. I don't want to import selected duplicates, so I configure Lightroom to ignore them. As I showed in the previous tutorial, I want my files prepended with a date that indicates when each image was taken. I configure Lightroom to do that by telling it to rename files according to a template. And I use a template that uses the date and the file name. I want all images that are imported to be identified with metadata that indicates that I was the photographer, that each image is copyrighted, and writes my website into each file. This hasn't been useful yet, but it could be useful if someone stole one of my images and tried to use it for a purpose that I didn't agree to. So that's the metadata import here. Within the main destination folder, I want Lightroom to put all of my images into a single subfolder. In this case, the images were taken during a single photo taking event on May 1st in my backyard. So I'm going to name the subfolder 0501 Backyard. I've made sure that Lightroom is configured to organize all the files into one folder, and I'm ready to import. Once I've checked that everything looks right, for example, 6 photos is about the number that I was expecting it to import. Lightroom has shown me here what the folder is going to look like. This looks to be correct. Once I'm ready to import, I click the import button. And that's all there is to it. When the import process is complete, I take my memory card and put it back in my camera. I don't want to be out in the field without a memory card in my camera. It's happened, and if you see something unusual or interesting, it's really a pain not to be able to record an image. It's a bit more work when I import a whole bunch of photos from more than one photo taking event, for example, when I get back from a vacation. So that's what we'll look at next. It's important to remember that if you use Lightroom, you probably want Lightroom to be in charge of your image files. If you want to delete, move, or rename image folders or image file names, always do so from within Lightroom. Okay, so now I'm going to show how to import when the memory card that I've inserted contains photos from more than one photo taking event. So in this case, I just got back from photos taken on May 2nd, but I was at more than one location and I took a number of photos, so I want to separate the two locations into their own folders. So I still go through the same steps. I import, and then I have a total of 49 photos. I want to import them to the 2013 folder. I want to rename files like we just did when there was only one photo taking event. I want my metadata settings applied during the import. And in this case, I want to import them into a different subfolder, and I'm going to just call it 0599 Prince Edward County. So that's a temporary folder which won't exist when I'm done moving the photos to their own photo taking event folders. So I'm going to start the import process and pause the screencast, and we'll resume when it's done. Okay, so the import is complete now. You can see all 49 of those images are now in this folder. But this isn't actually the folders that I want. I want two different folders, because I had two photo taking events today. So I'm going to create a new folder inside 2013, which is May 2nd, and I had two photo taking events. This was the first one, was at Prince Edward Point, and I don't want to include any selected photos. I'm just creating the folder, and I'm going to create another folder for 05022 at Kaiser Crossroads. Now I need to select which photos I want in those two folders. So I go to the folder here, and I'm going to select starting from the beginning, and I know all of these photos were taken at Prince Edward Point, all of these photos were taken at Prince Edward Point, going to here, so I shift select that entire group. Those were taken at Prince Edward Point, so I drag them over there. I do want the files to be moved because, as I mentioned, I want Lightroom in charge of my image file, so I'll move those. Now at this point, all of the remaining files are actually from Kaiser Crossroads, so I'll just select them all and move them. I could have just renamed the 0599 folder, but for now I'll just move them just to show you that that's generally what I do. And I know I'm done when there are no photos inside the 0599. So then I just remove that folder and go to Windows Explorer and make sure that it's not there. So that concludes the import process. I've shown how to import files when the card has only one photo taking event, and now I've just shown what to do when it has multiple photo taking events. So that is what allows the files and folders to keep my photos organized. I hope that helps, and we'll see you on another tutorial.